My name is Teresa Holloway. I'm 68 years old, and until last winter, I worked part-time as a file clerk at a rural health clinic just outside of Spokane, Washington. Most days, I sorted lab results and made tea for the younger nurses, who thought I was just another old woman who needed to stay busy. I smiled a lot. I kept quiet. People assume silence means you're content. But in truth, I've been quietly surviving for most of my life. I lost my husband, Mark, to a heart attack 13 years ago. We were married 31 years. He passed in the hallway between our bedroom and the kitchen, right near the thermostat that always stuck in winter. I'd raised our son David alone after that. He was 22 when it happened, and he coped by burying himself in his work. That boy built a software empire before 30, and now he's a millionaire. Maybe more. He doesn't talk numbers with me anymore. We don't talk much at all, honestly. But every year, without fail, David comes home for Thanksgiving. Even after marrying Liana, the woman with designer handbags and a 100-watt smile, he always came back, though the visits became shorter, more transactional. Still, this year, I cooked everything. I cut coupons for weeks. The turkey was smaller than usual. Birds are expensive now. But I seasoned it the way he liked. I even made the sweet potato casserole he used to ask for when he was 10. The one with toasted marshmallows. My tiny kitchen smelled like tradition. That mattered to me. And for once, he wasn't late. He walked in just as I was folding the linen napkins I bought on clearance last summer. "Mom," he said, kissing my cheek. "This smells amazing." Then came Liana, stepping through the door behind him. She was wearing cream-colored cashmere, the kind you don't cook in, hair perfect, lipstick like a magazine ad. She smiled at me and said, "Happy Thanksgiving, Teresa." Not Mom, just Teresa. I didn't correct her. We sat at the table. The dining room only fits 4, but I'd set out the good china, the ones I only ever used on anniversaries. I hadn't used them in years. We passed dishes, made polite conversation. Liana talked about their trip to Lisbon. David mentioned a new contract in Chicago. I nodded, smiled, refilled their wine. My knees ached from standing, but I was content just to have them here. Then, as I was pouring gravy into the ceramic bowl shaped like a pumpkin, David leaned back, looked at me across the table, and said, his voice warm, casual, "So, did you enjoy the lake house I gave you, Mom?" Time slowed. The ladle hovered over the bowl, gravy nearly spilling onto the tablecloth. I looked at him. "What house?" David blinked. "The lake house. You know, the one on Lake Harrington. I signed the deed over to you 2 years ago. It was supposed to be a birthday surprise." I felt the blood drain from my face. 2 years ago? I'd spent that birthday alone, eating canned soup because the power bill had come early. My car had broken down the week before. Still staring at him, I said it again, softer this time. "What house, David?" I didn't miss the way Liana's hand twitched, knocking her fork against the edge of her plate. She reached for her phone so fast it nearly tipped her wine glass. "Oh," she said, standing. "I just remembered. I need to confirm something for tomorrow's appointment. Excuse me." She walked out of the room with her phone pressed to her ear, but she wasn't talking. David looked confused. "Wait. Mom, what do you mean, what house? Lake Harrington. I bought it for you. You've always loved the water." I put the ladle down carefully and sat. My chest felt tight. "David," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I saw something shift behind his eyes. He glanced toward the kitchen where his wife had disappeared. "I had my assistant handle the paperwork," he said. "The deed, the maintenance payments, everything." I just stared at him. I never got a deed. I never got anything. The room fell silent. Tension thickened like the gravy cooling in the bowl. Then he stood. "Wait," he muttered, pulling out his phone. "That can't be right. I've been sending money every month." I didn't say anything. My eyes were fixed on the kitchen doorway. David looked at me again. $1,500 every month for 2 years. You haven't been getting it?" I shook my head once. I wasn't breathing properly. I wanted to scream, to cry, to accuse. But instead, I reached behind me and pulled something from the shelf. A small ceramic teacup, white, with a navy blue rim, cracked, glued back once, a long time ago. A gift from David when he was 8. It said in childish handwriting, "Best mom ever." I set it down in front of him. "You gave me this when you had nothing but allowance money. You meant it then." I looked at him, not angry, just steady. "You say you gave me a house, but I never got it. And now, I think I know why." That was the moment Liana walked back in. Her phone was still in her hand, but her face was pale. The mask she always wore, flawless, composed, was slipping. Finally. And David was about to see the truth. I became a widow when I was 43. Mark didn't leave a lot behind. A few savings, some tools, his watch, and a garage full of half-finished projects. He died on a cold Tuesday morning in March. Fell over in the backyard while changing the spark plugs in our old Ford. David was a sophomore at WSU then, studying pre-med. I remember the call like it was yesterday. I didn't cry in front of him. I just packed up the casserole from the oven, drove to campus, and sat beside my son in silence. After the funeral, David said he'd drop out. Said he'd work full-time, help me pay the mortgage. I told him no. I told him, "You'll keep going. I'll figure the rest out." And I did. I took a job at the school district office during the day and cleaned exam rooms at the urgent care center by night. I cut coupons so tight the ink rubbed off on my fingers. I washed and reused foil. I made ends meet. Barely. I packed David's lunches in old dish towels because I couldn't afford those plastic boxes all the other mothers were using. I folded each one carefully. Rice, boiled eggs, a little soy sauce chicken. He said the towel smelled like home. I liked that. We couldn't afford heat some months, so I'd let him sleep on the sofa where it was warmest and stack books around the edges to trap the warmth. When he got sick during finals, I made ginger tea and wrapped his feet in hot towels. I gave him everything. But I didn't give it like a martyr. I gave it with love. With a kind of quiet joy only a mother can understand. I remember once, he was 11, and I was washing dishes late at night. He came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and said, "When I grow up, I'm going to buy you a house by the lake, Mama. One with a porch and a rocking chair, so you don't ever have to do dishes again." I laughed then, not because it was funny, but because he said it like a vow. And I believed him, not because I expected a house, but because I knew it came from the softest, purest part of him. Years passed. He made it to med school, but somewhere along the way, he pivoted. Tech consulting. He was good at it. Brilliant, really. And fast. Within 5 years, he had a company with 20 employees. Within 8, over 200. When he got married, I didn't cry. I wore a navy blue dress with pearl buttons, the same one Mark said I looked beautiful in. I stood in the second row, just behind the photographers. Liana was beautiful. I'll never deny that. a vision in white silk. She told me once that I reminded her of her grandmother, the tough but gentle type. I liked her at first, but after the wedding, things changed. David visited less. He said it was just business, new acquisitions, bigger clients. Liana always sent flowers on birthdays, bouquets so large they barely fit through my door. But the card never said love, just warm wishes from Liana and David. It's strange how you can feel a distance widen without anyone saying a word. It wasn't the lack of calls or the quiet holidays. It was the way they never asked. Never asked if the roof still leaked in the guest room. Never asked if the heater worked in winter. Never asked if I had enough to cover my prescriptions after the copay changes. There's a crack above the kitchen sink. A rain stain that looks like a map of a country no one's discovered. I look at it sometimes, tracing the edges with my eyes while waiting for the kettle to boil. That's where the wind whistles through in January. But I don't patch it anymore. Not because I've given up, but because it's familiar now. Like silence. Like being forgotten politely. Like the ache that sits in your chest when you realize you raised someone to be successful, and they succeeded in forgetting who they started with. But I didn't complain. I never picked up the phone to ask for help, because I remembered that little boy who once promised me a porch and a rocking chair. And somehow, I believed he hadn't changed. Not completely. I held on to that memory like a photograph I couldn't bear to fold. So when he said, "Did you enjoy the lake house I gave you?" I wasn't just hearing a lie. I was hearing the echo of a promise, twisted into something I didn't recognize. And in that moment, with the steam from the gravy still rising between us, I felt something inside me begin to unravel. But not in anger, in grief. Quiet, slow, private grief. For a bond I thought could never be undone. Because once, I was his whole world. I was his first home. And now, he thought I lived in a house by the lake that I'd never seen. David was still standing. His brow furrowed now. The confident calm he carried into every business deal was beginning to slip. I had it transferred into your name, he said again, as if repetition could make it more true. Lake Harrington, the white cottage with blue shutters. You always said you loved that lake. I stared at him. My hands were trembling beneath the tablecloth. No one told me about a house, David, I said slowly. I'm still living in the same duplex I've rented for the past 15 years. He looked at me, waiting for the punchline. But I had none. I mean, you didn't move in? No, I said. I've never even been to Lake Harrington. I didn't even know you bought property there. He looked genuinely confused, not defensive, not angry, just baffled. From across the table, Liana reached for her wine glass, her fingers clumsy on the stem. The ice in her posture was starting to melt. Her eyes darted toward the kitchen, as if considering another quick escape. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Not yet. I don't understand, David said, his voice growing quiet. I gave my assistant all the instructions. You were supposed to get the deed, the maintenance checks, everything. The what? I asked, though my throat was tight. $1,500 a month, he said, blinking. I've been sending it for 2 years. For maintenance, groceries, property taxes, just living expenses. I wanted you to be comfortable. I nearly dropped my spoon. $1,500 a month for 2 years. I had been living off instant oatmeal and dollar store aspirin. I'd pawned Mark's wedding band to pay for car repairs. I'd watered down milk. I'd wrapped my feet in blankets instead of turning up the heat because the electric bill was too high. I haven't received a single payment, I said, voice barely more than air. Not one. David paled. That's impossible. From behind him, Liana's wine glass clinked against the plate. David turned toward her. Did we change her account information? She cleared her throat. I don't remember exactly, she said, eyes lowered. Maybe. You asked me to handle some of the logistics when your assistant was on maternity leave, remember? I might have updated something. I'll check. Her tone was cool, but her hand was shaking. That's when David pulled out his phone. Let me call Elise, he muttered. She'll know. The tension in the room dropped several degrees. Even the air around us felt colder. I watched Liana's jaw tighten. David paced a few feet away, phone to his ear. Hey, Elise, sorry to bother you on a holiday. I need you to pull up the file for the Lake Harrington property, the one I bought for my mother 2 years ago. He paused, listening. Yeah, that one. Can you confirm the deed transfer date and where we sent it? His eyes flicked up to me as he listened. Then came the next question. And the monthly payments? Can you check the account number we used? Liana stood abruptly. I'm going to check on the pie, she said too loudly. I think it's burning. I watched her walk quickly to the kitchen, heels clicking on the old tile, and disappear behind the door. David frowned. Can you say that again? He asked into the phone. Yes, that's my mom's full name. Teresa Louise Holloway. He paused. That's not her address, he said flatly. I swallowed hard. And that's not her bank account number either. He looked at me, then toward the kitchen, where silence now hovered like smoke. Elise, he said carefully. Who gave you that information? Another pause. My wife? His voice cracked just slightly on the second word. The clatter of a pie dish hitting the counter echoed from the other room. David lowered the phone slowly, his face ashen. I think we've got a problem, he said. But I already knew. I knew from the way Liana's voice was no longer sweet. I knew from the way she avoided my eyes during dinner. And I knew from the deep, quiet ache inside my chest. That ache that comes when something you've long suspected finally puts on a name tag and introduces itself as truth. I pushed my chair back. I stood. And I walked into the kitchen. She was standing there, still as glass, hands braced on either side of the pie tin, like it could save her. I spoke quietly. Where's my house? Liana? She looked up at me, eyes wide. And for the first time in 3 years, she had nothing to say. David followed me into the kitchen, his phone still pressed to his chest, as if clutching it might shield him from the truth unraveling around us. Liana straightened her back. She wore the expression of someone trying to remember a script, but the lines had vanished. Her hands moved to the edge of the countertop, gripping it like a lifeboat. David's voice was quiet. Mom, is it really true? You've never seen a single deposit? Never got the deed? I turned to face him fully now. The old kitchen light above us flickered, as it often did in the winter, casting a tremble of shadow across his face. No, sweetheart, I said gently. I thought you were just busy. I didn't want to disturb you. His mouth parted slightly. Busy? For 2 years? I shrugged, not with resentment, just honesty. You have a company to run, a family to take care of. I didn't want to sound like the kind of mother who asks for too much. So, I made do. David blinked at me, and I could see it, his heart breaking in real time. Liana jumped in quickly, too quickly. Well, there was a mix-up. Maybe I thought you changed banks. You never answer texts. Remember? And I did forward some paperwork when Elise was out on leave, but she stopped, realizing her voice was rising. David turned to her. You thought she changed banks? And never confirmed it? I don't remember. Maybe there was a typo. 2 years worth of typos. His tone wasn't angry yet, just colder than before. Liana swallowed. It's not like I forged anything. Maybe there was a name error. Just then, David's phone buzzed again. He glanced down. I watched as his face shifted from pale to blank, his corporate mask sliding into place. Elise just sent the transfer confirmation records, he said. You want to know the recipient name? No one answered. Teresa B. Holloway. I frowned. B? I thought your middle name was Louise. It is. We both turned to Liana. She lifted her hands slightly, palms out. Oh, come on, she said. Teresa B. could have been a clerical mistake. Bank clerks mess things up all the time. David didn't blink. And the account number? She hesitated. He looked at me. Mom, can I see your bank account statement? Just one page. Any month, I nodded, moving slowly. I opened the drawer by the fridge, the one with every bill and receipt I'd saved like breadcrumbs through my life. I handed him a paper printout from last March. He scanned it, pulled up Elise's PDF on his phone. The numbers didn't match, not even close. He stared at it for a long second, then looked at Liana, and I knew that look. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was recognition of something sour that had been sitting in the house for years, but never smelled until now. Whose account is this? He asked her. I don't know, she said too loudly. Maybe someone at the title company messed up. Maybe Mom used a second account and forgot. She's older now. Her voice cracked slightly, reaching for condescension like it was a defense. I stepped in, not loudly, but with enough weight to draw both of them back. I don't need anything from you, Liana, I said calmly. I don't want the money. I don't want the house. I've never wanted more than what I had. I turned to my son. But I do want the truth. David looked between us, lips parted. This whole time, he whispered. Mom, I thought I gave you peace, a view of the water. I thought I was taking care of you. You were, I said gently. You tried. I just never saw it. The air hung heavy again. Liana opened her mouth, but no words came out. David finally spoke. Elise is checking who signed the deed paperwork, he said quietly. If it wasn't my mom, then someone forged it. The clink of the spoon in the pumpkin pie dish was the only sound after that. And Liana still didn't meet my eyes. We didn't finish dinner. The turkey sat untouched, the cranberry sauce still shaped like the can, the pie barely cut. The only thing that got carved that evening was the silence. David sat at the table, laptop open, glasses on, something he only ever wore when reading contracts. Liana stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her phone clenched tightly like it might crack under pressure. I stayed near the sink, watching, quiet. David typed fast. His inbox had thousands of emails, but he knew what to look for. Okay, he muttered. Here's the deed transfer confirmation from March 2 years ago, signed electronically by Teresa B. Holloway. He looked up at me. I shook my head. I've never signed anything, David. Not electronically, not on paper. And I've never been called Teresa B. in my life. He nodded slowly, almost absently, as he kept scrolling. Monthly payments started the same week, March 14th. $1,500 to account ending in 2481. Set up as a recurring transfer. I walked toward the table. That's not my account. He pulled up a bank statement. It says the mailing address for the recipient is 117 Maple Street, Unit 4B. I froze. Maple Street? I repeated. That's on the other side of town. I've never lived there. David tapped the screen. It's listed on all the forms as your updated residence. Even has your name on the mailbox photo, attached by the notary. Liana was breathing harder now. She tried to move around the table. Maybe that's a clerical thing. Maybe the title company confused two Teresas. David didn't answer her. Instead, he opened a second tab. Pulled up the PDF Elise had just sent. These are all 24 payments, $1,500 a month. That's $36,000 total. He clicked the final one, dated last month. Still going strong, still going to the same account. His face was unreadable now. Corporate David had returned. Cold, methodical, detached. But I saw the twitch in his jaw, the tension in his knuckles as he gripped the mouse. I stepped closer and laid a hand, gently, on his shoulder. Stop for a moment, David. He paused, looked up. I don't need the money, I said softly. You've always given me more than enough. You gave me your childhood, your trust. That was enough for me. He blinked fast, swallowed hard. But this, I continued, this is something else. This isn't about money. He nodded, wordlessly. I turned to Liana, who stood with her arms tight across her chest. I'm not accusing, I said gently. But the truth, whatever it is, will come. Because numbers don't lie. People can... But numbers always tell their story eventually. Her face was pale. And suddenly, I remembered something Mark once told me, just after we moved into our old house. We were sitting on the porch. The sun was setting, and he was holding a mug of black coffee. Trust, he said, is the most expensive thing you'll ever give someone, and the hardest thing to ask back once they've spent it wrong. I looked at Liana again, and all I could think was, I had trusted her with the softest part of my life, my son. And now I didn't know where that trust had gone, or if I'd ever get it back. It took less than 20 minutes at the bank for the mask to fully fall. David sat to my right, his jaw tight, fingers pressed against his lips. I could feel the silent storm building in him, but it was nothing compared to what sat inside me. Quiet, steady, heavier than rage. The branch manager laid the forms in front of us. The account ending in 2481 had been opened under the name Teresa B. Holloway 2 years ago. There was an ID on file, a scan of a driver's license that looked almost like mine. Same picture, different address, same name, but that B again, right in the middle. I studied the signature, looped, neat cursive. It wasn't mine. I don't write my R's like that. I never have. The manager looked between me and the paper. Do you recognize this as your signature, ma'am? No, I said simply. David leaned forward. And the secondary email used to verify the account, Teresa_HollowayHomeCare@gmail. That's not hers either. My mom doesn't have a Gmail account. She still uses AOL. The man frowned. Well, the account's been receiving steady monthly deposits. All activity traces back to purchases that appear domestic. Grocery stores, a few beauty salons, online furniture payments. David was already on his phone, checking Liana's recent transactions. He looked up. She ordered a new outdoor chaise for a lake house patio 4 months ago. Said it was for guests. I thought It was for work. I said nothing. My hands were folded, still, but inside, something in me had sunk like a heavy stone in deep water. Not because of the money, not because of the deception, but because it was her, Liana. She had called me mom. She had once cried in my arms after her father passed. I'd cooked soup for her when she had morning sickness with Ethan. I'd crocheted her a pale blue shawl the night she married my son. I thought we had become family. Instead, she had used my name like a skeleton key to open a house I never walked through, to receive money I never touched, to build a life that pretended to include me, while carefully ensuring I never entered the picture. David sat back in his chair, quiet. The silence in the bank office was almost holy in its weight. I looked at the signature one more time. Then I looked away. Not because I couldn't bear it, but because I didn't need to see it again. I already knew what it meant. She signed away a life that was meant for me, I said softly, and she made sure I'd never even know it existed. The manager, unsure what to say, looked down awkwardly. David broke the silence. We need to escalate this. Fraud, forgery, identity theft. I reached for his hand, not to stop him, but to center him. I don't care about the prosecution, I said gently. That's your decision, not mine. He stared at me. What do you care about then, Mom? I took a breath. I'm not in pain because I lost money, I said quietly. I've lived on little before, and I can live on little again. I met his eyes. My own were glassy, but I refused to let the tears fall. I'm in pain, I whispered, because someone who once called me Mom took away something you gave me out of love. And they did it like it cost them nothing. David's face cracked then, just a hairline fracture. Enough to see the boy underneath the man. I let go of his hand. And for the first time in my life, I realized, sometimes heartbreak doesn't come with yelling. Sometimes it just signs your name where it doesn't belong and walks away with the life you never even got to live. We were back at the house before dinner had even gone cold. But the warmth was gone. From the food, from the walls, from the air between us. David sat across from Liana, arms folded, expression unreadable. Not cold, not yet, but something had shut off behind his eyes, like someone had flipped a switch and drained the light. Liana was pacing in the living room, her voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. She kept glancing at me. But I didn't speak. David did. Just one question. Low. Why? She stopped pacing, turned slowly. Her lip trembled. And then finally, she cried. Not the dignified kind. Not the kind meant for sympathy. It was messy. Raw. A child's sob from inside an adult's face. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she said through broken breaths. I panicked. My parents, my mom, she got cancer, and Dad's insurance lapsed, and the hospital bills came in like waves. And we were going to lose their house. They've lived there for 40 years, David. 40. He blinked, unmoving. I didn't know what else to do, she continued. You were so busy. The house was just sitting there. I thought I'd borrow the payments, just for a while. I'd pay it back once the estate settled. I stayed silent. She looked at me, eyes red, pleading. I didn't mean to steal, Mom. I swear. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I watched her for a long moment. Then softly, I said, But you did steal, Liana. You didn't borrow. You didn't ask. You signed my name and took what wasn't yours. Her chin dropped. Her tears quickened. I thought you didn't care. You seemed fine in your little house and you never asked about the lake place. I interrupted, not sharply, just clearly. I didn't ask, I said, because I trusted you. The room went silent again. She sat down, head in hands. I'm sorry. I didn't think it would go this far. I really thought I could fix it before anyone noticed. David finally spoke again. Fix it how, Liana? Keep siphoning money until you feel better? You thought she didn't need it, so that made it okay? And that's when Liana said something that made the breath catch in my chest. But she doesn't need a lake house. She's fine. She's always fine. She clips coupons. She knits sweaters. She looked at me, voice rising. You never ask for anything. You act like nothing ever hurts you. So I thought it wouldn't matter. For the first time that night, I felt something rise in me. Not anger, not grief, something harder to name. I stood, walked to the edge of the room, and then, without looking back, I said, yes, I live simply. Yes, I don't complain. Yes, I survive. I turned to face her. But don't mistake that for not feeling. Don't confuse endurance with emptiness. She looked stunned. David stared at me, eyes wide. I walked over to the fireplace mantel, picked up a photo of Mark and me, our anniversary in 1986. We were laughing, standing by the river before any of this. Still holding the photo, I said, you looked at my life and thought, she doesn't need. But living doesn't mean not hurting. I hurt quietly. I've done it for decades, but I've never stopped feeling, and I've never stopped knowing what's right. Liana's sobs softened now, less about guilt, more about fear. Because sometimes, when a good person speaks plainly, it's far more terrifying than any shouting ever could be. And now, she knew, her mask hadn't just slipped, it had shattered. And the woman she thought would never speak up had finally said enough. David and I sat in the kitchen long after Liana had gone upstairs. The clock ticked. The casserole dish had gone cold. A single candle flickered in the middle of the table, its light, like me, small but steady. He didn't speak at first, just stared at his own hands like they were foreign to him, like he was trying to remember who he was before all this. Then finally, he said it. I thought you were fine. His voice cracked on the last word. I looked at him, not with judgment, but with a weight I had carried for far too long. Because I don't complain? I asked quietly. He nodded, eyes glassy. You never ask for help. You always say you're okay. I thought maybe someone was taking care of you. Maybe the lake house made life easier and you were just being modest. I thought Liana had arranged something with you. I let the silence breathe between us before I answered. David, I said gently, I haven't bought a bottle of filtered water in 2 years. I boil tap now. Let it cool in old milk jugs. I've been breaking my heart pills in half, taking them every other night, so the prescription lasts longer. My heater broke last winter, and I wore 3 pairs of socks to bed. His face crumpled like paper. You told me you were warm, he whispered. I didn't want you to worry, I said. You were already carrying so much. A new family, a baby on the way, a demanding job. He ran both hands over his face. I thought you had everything you needed. I shook my head. What I needed was truth, not comfort, not even the lake house. I just needed to know I still mattered. He broke. Right there at the table, my son put his head down and cried into his palms, like he did as a boy when he dropped his science project, or when the dog ran away for 3 days. But this was heavier and older, I reached for the napkin, passed it to him without a word. He wiped his eyes, then looked up at me with something different. Resolve, shame, but also a kind of reawakening. "Mom," he said, "I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try." I nodded. "Then we'll need someone who knows how," I said softly, "and I think it's time to call Jeanette." He blinked. "Jeanette? From the real estate firm?" I smiled for the first time that day, just a little. "She's more than a realtor now. After her brother wiped out her savings and left her name on a foreclosure, she went back to law school at 52. Now she specializes in estate fraud and elder abuse." He sat up. "Wait, Jeanette, who brought us lemon bars at Dad's wake?" "That's the one." He exhaled. "Of course she is." I reached into my purse, pulled out a slip of paper with her number already written. "I called her last week," I said simply. Something felt off. I didn't know what it was then, but I felt it. David looked at me, stunned. "You knew?" "No," I said. But I trusted my instincts, and I kept the receipt for every strange silence Liana gave me. He gave a dry, almost disbelieving laugh. "You always did keep everything." "Some things," I replied, "are worth keeping." We didn't say anything for a long while after that, because sometimes, after truth finally finds its way out, the silence that follows can actually feel like breathing. Jeanette arrived the next afternoon in her usual gray pantsuit and cherry lipstick, still brisk, still brilliant, still the woman who once cross-stitched courtroom phrases into tea towels just to keep her hands busy. She didn't waste time. Within minutes, she'd unpacked a manila folder full of statements, tax transcripts, and account screenshots that David had forwarded. I watched from my living room chair, the old green one with the rip in the side. I didn't say much, just listened, took it all in, like I always do. She spoke without drama, but with that sharpness only women who've once lost everything can afford to speak with. She didn't just redirect the lake house payments, Jeanette said, tapping the files. She filed as your tax preparer for 2023 using TurboTax self-service. She claimed a disability credit in your name and directed the refund, $6,137, to a Wells Fargo account ending in 4228. David cursed under his breath. Jeanette didn't flinch. "That account belongs to Liana." I stayed still. "She also opened a City Platinum rewards card in your name 18 months ago," Jeanette added, "charging over $4,000 at 2 designer furniture stores and a luxury bedding outlet, mostly deliveries to the lake house." David blinked. "That must be the velvet headboard and the patio set." "Possibly," Jeanette said, deadpan. She looked at me then, gently, but firmly. "Teresa, in total, the confirmed fraud amounts to $43,140, not including the lake house value, which we estimate at $215,000. I nodded slowly. "So," I murmured, "nearly $250,000. Jeanette didn't answer, but her silence confirmed it. David leaned back, stunned. His hand brushed through his hair like he was trying to pull the shame off his scalp. I didn't cry, not this time. Instead, something in me settled, like a stone finding its place at the bottom of a stream. I looked at Jeanette. "What are my options?" She glanced at David before answering. "You could press charges: elder financial abuse, fraud, identity theft, tax fraud, credit misuse. All would stand. You'd have a strong case." David opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "Not yet," I said calmly. Jeanette nodded, as if expecting that answer. Then, she said, you can also file a civil claim, reclaim the title to the lake house, freeze the fraudulent card, file with the IRS to reverse the false tax return. That's the quiet route. Clean. No courtrooms. I looked out the window. The sky was soft gray, just like the day Mark died. And just like then, I felt something inside me go still. Not cold, just resolved. I turned back to them. She stole under my name. She built comfort on my silence. I held Jeanette's gaze. But it ends with me. Jeanette nodded. David swallowed hard. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't look at him just yet. My eyes were on a number Jeanette had written in the margin. $258,140. Number, that wasn't just a number. That was the price of trust. And now, it was also the price of reclaiming myself. It was colder by the lake, even though the sun was out, and the air shimmered on the water's surface like someone had sprinkled diamonds. David parked the car on the circular driveway of the Harrington Lake House, or what should have been my lake house. I stepped out slowly. My bones ached from the ride, but something else inside me was heavier than my knees. The house was breathtaking. Modern cedar and glass, a wraparound porch, planters overflowing with white begonias, the kind of home that looked like it had always belonged on the cover of a magazine. And yet, I felt nothing. No pride, no excitement, just a vast, echoing quiet in my chest. We walked up the path. David knocked. It wasn't Liana who answered. It was an older woman in a fleece robe, gentle eyes, face creased like a soft map. Behind her stood a man, same age, holding a bowl of grapes. They looked surprised, but not alarmed. Oh, she said politely, you must be the Holloways. David cleared his throat. Actually, I'm David Holloway. This is my mother, Teresa. The woman blinked. I'm sorry. Liana said this house was a gift. From you. Her husband added, we've been living here since her parents fell ill. She said it was safer, quieter for them. There was a long pause. I looked around, the blanket on the couch, the humming of the tea kettle, the photos on the wall that didn't belong to me. Everything in this house was beautiful. But none of it had my name, and none of it was given with truth. I took a breath. Then, as gently as I could, I said, no one can gift something built on deception, not even to family. The woman's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. There was something in my voice, I think, that told her I wasn't there to shout. I was there to end it. David spoke next, firmly, but not cruelly. We've reclaimed the deed. You'll have 30 days to relocate. I'll personally arrange for movers and short-term housing. The man nodded slowly. We understand. There was no scene, no shouting, no slamming of doors. Just two strangers realizing that the comfort they had built was never truly theirs, and choosing, quietly, to return it. We left them with dignity and silence. As we stood back outside, I looked at the lake again. It was still glistening, but it didn't feel like a reward. It felt like a gravestone for something I had once dreamed of, but no longer needed. David turned to me. I'll restore the property in your name, and we'll furnish it however you like. Make it a place you love. I looked at him, and for the first time, I smiled. Let's leave it empty for now, I said. Let it breathe again. Let it remember who it was meant for. He nodded, and, together, we walked away from the front steps. No keys were exchanged. No papers signed that day. Just a quiet reclaiming of something that had never been about the house. It had always been about the truth. And finally, it belonged to me again. The courtroom smelled like dry paper and stale coffee. Liana sat 3 benches ahead of me, her hair tied in a neat low bun, her blazer too crisp for someone claiming regret. She didn't turn around. Not once. The judge read the charges: fraud, identity theft, misappropriation of funds, filing false tax returns. David sat beside me, eyes forward, hands clenched on his knees. He didn't cry. Not anymore. He was far beyond tears now. Liana's lawyer pled for leniency. "She's a first-time offender," he said. She was under severe emotional and financial distress. Her parents' medical bills exceeded their insurance. She panicked. She never intended long-term harm. I heard the words. But they didn't land. Intentions are like shadows. They follow, but they don't carry weight. The judge was firm, but not cruel. Liana received 5 years of probation, restitution required, all $43,000 plus interest. The title of the lake house reverted to my name, officially. She would face mandatory financial counseling and be barred from opening credit in anyone else's name for a decade. It wasn't prison, but it was consequence. She looked at me once as she was leaving. Just once. Her eyes weren't angry, just hollow. As if even she no longer recognized the mask she had worn too long. David filed for divorce within the week. The press found the story. Doctor's wife, accused of stealing from his elderly mother. His clinic's PR team issued a statement. He stepped down temporarily. He needed space, they said. And that was true. He moved in with a friend, took long walks alone, ate dinner in silence. One night, as I folded the laundry in my modest little home, he came by unannounced, holding a basket of groceries and a face full of exhaustion. We sat in the kitchen again, like we did that Thanksgiving. Only this time, the candle was new, and so was the peace. He stared into his cup of chamomile tea and whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "You're still the boy who brought me wildflowers after your first paycheck," I said. He looked at me, eyes wet. "You're still the man who built his life trying to honor his father." "But I let it happen, Mom. I let her do this to you." "No," I said firmly, yet softly. "You trusted. That's not the crime. That's human." He shook his head. But I stopped him with a glance. "Trusting wasn't your mistake, David. Choosing the wrong person was." He blinked, the truth landing slowly. "And what does that make me?" I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was healing. "It makes you, like all of us, trying, failing, learning, and still capable of better." The kettle hissed softly behind me, and for the first time in months, my son took a sip of tea, without guilt curdling the flavor. There were no fireworks, no grand apology tour, just this, a son sitting with his mother. Still bruised, but honest. Still hurting, but here. And sometimes being here, with open eyes and open hands, is the beginning of everything worth keeping. I moved into the lake house on the first day of spring. The morning air was crisp, but not cruel, and the lake shimmered like it had been waiting to exhale. There were no grand moving trucks, no fanfare, just me, and a single suitcase. I unpacked slowly, not because I had so much, but because I had enough. The lake house didn't feel like a reward. It felt like a return. Not just to a place, but to a version of myself I had misplaced. That first morning, I brewed a pot of jasmine tea. Steam curled into the air like memory. I sat by the window in the sunroom, a thick knitted shawl over my shoulders. The lake looked peaceful, not flawless, but steady. In my hand was the same ceramic teacup I had always used, white porcelain with a faded blue rim, and that hairline crack near the base, the one David had once dropped when he was 7. For years, I kept it hidden at the back of the cupboard. Not broken, just ashamed of its flaw. But on moving day, David brought it to me, carefully wrapped, and when I unwrapped it, I saw he had painted the crack with gold. "It's called kintsugi," he said softly, "the Japanese art of repairing with gold. The break becomes part of the beauty." I held the cup that morning, now lined with shimmering veins. It didn't just hold tea. It held every word I hadn't said, every birthday I'd smiled through, every night I'd skipped dinner so he could eat meat instead of noodles. Now I drank slowly, and not out of need, but out of peace. David visited often, not out of guilt anymore, but from a longing to rebuild without performance. He fixed the old swing outside, painted the porch railings, and every Sunday brought me lilies from the farmer's market. One afternoon, while we watched a bird land near the dock, he said, "You're different now." I smiled without turning my head. "No, son," I said. "I'm just visible again." He sat back, thoughtful. "You never used to speak up like this." "I did," I said. "You just weren't listening." He winced, but then nodded. "I'm listening now." And that was enough, because I wasn't asking for restitution anymore. I wasn't holding out my hands, waiting for what was owed. I had stood up. I had claimed my name, my worth, my space. And every morning, as I held that golden-lined teacup, I repeated a single line in my head like a prayer. I don't need anything. I just need the truth. That was always what I wanted. Not luxury, not pity, just to be seen. And now, I saw myself. And that, I had learned, was the truest form of coming home. I never asked David to visit, but every Sunday, just before the sun dipped below the pine trees, his car would pull into the driveway. Sometimes he brought groceries, sometimes a new mystery novel from the library, sometimes just himself. And that was more than enough. We'd sit on the porch, eat soup, and talk like two people learning to speak the same language again. But one evening, he came with someone else. She was tall, with quiet eyes and a firm handshake. Her name was Eleanor. "Forensic accountant," David said with a sheepish grin. "Specializes in white-collar investigations." I thought that was poetic. I smiled, not because it was a joke, but because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't choosing someone based on charm or performance. He was choosing based on truth. Eleanor wasn't loud. She wasn't trying to win me over. She asked if she could help with the dishes. She asked about the lake. She asked how I liked my tea. She didn't pry. And I noticed how David looked at her, not like someone searching for validation, but like someone relieved to finally breathe normally. Later that evening, after she left, David and I sat quietly by the fire. He poked the embers with the iron rod. "She doesn't remind me of Liana," he said, almost in a whisper. I nodded. "She shouldn't." He looked at me. "She doesn't remind me of you, either." I looked at him fully then. "That's good," I said gently, "because you don't need someone who's like me. You need someone who helps you not become the man who was lied to." He blinked, like something in him had settled. "I call her every night," he admitted. I smiled again. "And you never used to call anyone." He shrugged. "I used to think calling meant you were weak. Now I think maybe it means you've survived." We didn't toast to that. We didn't need to. We just sat, listened to the wood crackle, let the quiet hang between us like a soft curtain, not to divide, but to shelter. That night, as he drove away, I watched his headlights disappear down the gravel road. And for the first time in years, I realized the light outside my house wasn't the only thing that had returned. My son, the boy who once promised me a house by the lake, was becoming the man who could finally come home. I could have gone back to work. The clinic near the town center still had my desk. They offered a part-time schedule, said the seniors missed my energy, but I declined, gently, firmly. I no longer needed to fill my days with usefulness to feel worthy. Instead, I started something different. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I hosted a writing circle at the community library. We didn't call it therapy, but in some ways, it was. 5, sometimes 7. Older women, widows, divorcees, forgotten aunts, gathered around a round oak table and wrote about gardens, about war, about the time their sister stole their first love. We laughed a lot more than you'd expect and cried less than we probably should have. I didn't call myself a teacher, but they started calling me Coach T, and that made me smile in a way I hadn't since David was in grade school. One afternoon after class, I sat by the lake, the journal in my lap open to a clean page. I didn't write about Liana, not anymore. She never apologized, not truly. She sent a letter once, typed cold, legal sounding. I hope one day you can find peace in your heart. I didn't reply, because peace was not something she had the power to give. And forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me. I had spent so long waiting for an apology I could believe in. But then I realized, forgiveness isn't something you hand to someone like a certificate. It's a door you close, softly, but fully. And that day, sitting by the water, I closed it. Not with malice, but with mercy for myself. I don't need her to understand the damage she caused. I understand it, and I lived through it. So I folded the letter, placed it in the back of my journal, not as a keepsake, but as proof that I had survived it without needing permission to move on. I poured a cup of tea into my cracked gold-lined cup, felt the steam warm my face. I breathed in and out. I was still here, older, wiser, softer in some places, sharper in others. I was not waiting for anyone to give me a place in their world anymore, because I had become a world of my own. And in that world, I was not just someone's mother or someone's mistake. I was home, to myself. And it turns out, that was the safest place I'd ever known. The lake is quiet at sunset, not silent. No, never silent, but calm, like the world has finally let out its breath after holding it all day. I sit on the back porch, same spot as always. The wooden chair creaks beneath me, just enough to remind me I'm still here. In my hands, a teacup. The same one, with the golden crack David painted. The same cup that once held tears, now holds nothing but warmth. I pour myself a fresh cup, not because I'm sad, but because this ritual, has become my definition of peace. People think healing is loud, that it looks like slamming doors or courtrooms or winning something in front of a crowd. But for me, it looked like this. A woman on a porch, alone, but not lonely, sipping tea from a cup that has been broken and made beautiful again. I've thought a lot about forgiveness. It's not a straight line. It doesn't come with a manual, and it certainly doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. Liana never said I'm sorry in a way that mattered, and maybe she never will, but I've stopped waiting. Because I realized forgiveness isn't for the one who wronged you. It's for the one who wakes up every day and chooses not to stay bitter. It's for me. And now, as the sun folds itself into the lake like an old story closing gently, I feel something settle inside me. Not closure, not revenge, but truth and peace. If you've listened this far, maybe you've known what it's like to give everything and be told, quietly, that it wasn't enough. Maybe someone has taken something from you, your place, your voice, your worth. And if they have, let me tell you something. The truth has a strange way of returning home. Slowly, quietly, but surely. Now I look into this lake, the one that reflects both past and future, and I ask you, whoever you are, wherever you are, do you think I was wrong to reclaim what was mine? Was I too cold, or just cold enough to finally feel warm again? Tell me what you would have done. Would you have forgiven? Would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have stood up, not with fists, but with your name? Because sometimes, all a woman really needs is a house she was promised, and the courage to step inside it and say, without shame or hesitation, I am home.